Time for tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. Have just been handed the first front pages. Lee Anderson isn't around, so The Guardian hasn't been ripped up yet tonight. Let's have a look at it. It reports that Tory constituencies have been allocated significantly more money than others from the government's £4 billion Levelling Up Fund. The Metro leads with public anger that PM Rishi Sunak has taken private flights to destinations close to London, like Blackpool. His team have defended the journeys, saying it wouldn't be practical to travel on the notoriously unreliable West Coast train line. And The Star has splashed on the story of a bus driver Elvis tribute act aiming for a #1 single. OK. Good on him. My superstar panel, back with me now, political commentator Dominic Samuels, former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nickell. Now, on Tuesday, the government, led by Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack, stood up to scheming Sturgeon and her dangerous gender recognition reform bill. However, among the Commons benches, a select group of Tories are lobbying the party collective to ensure the protection of women's rights and vulnerable teens. This conflict is centred around the proposed ban on trans conversion therapy, which pro-trans Conservative MP Alicia Kearns, an ally of Penny Mordaunt, has propelled to the forefront of the government's agenda. However, dozens of backbenchers are said to be opposed to the ban unless it includes safeguards to protect parents. That view was echoed by the Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who wrote to all Tory MPs insisting that parents must not be criminalised for having legitimate conversations with their children about whether they really want to change gender. So, Dominic Samuels, it feels like this is one step forward and two steps backwards in terms of the protection of women, but especially in this case, vulnerable teenagers.
Yeah, and it's because we have some very severely delusional people within the Conservative Party that seem...
Stop talking to about Sean like that.
Delusional, really delusional, and actually dangerous, the things that they're saying. Basically suggesting that medical professionals and parents should be criminalised. Suggesting that maybe there are other routes that you can take as a young person that don't include legally changing your gender, pumping yourself with hormone blockers, and taking
Amy's saying they're not saying that.
It's fundamentally not. The only divide in the Conservative Party right now is those who understand what's going on and those who want to conflate the issue with toilets and changing rooms.
Are completely interconnected, and this is the problem.
No, they're not.
Like you, in your fairy world, people that take advantage of the system don't exist. This problem has arisen from Scotland and changes to the gender recognition bill. All of the safeguards that would seek to protect women, to protect women's spaces, whether that's in prisons, toilets, schools, were voted down. And the reason for that was that they didn't want the narrative to be that trans people are criminals. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that people exist that take advantage of the system, and we've seen that use the label trans to access women's spaces to fulfil their own sick sexual fantasies, and women should be respected and protected.
I think you've fundamentally you've misunderstood exactly what the GRA and the gender recognition certificate really is. All it is to do with your birth certificate. When's the last time you showed your birth certificate to anyone?
So let's connect some dots, because you seem to be unable to do that. If you are able to legally change your gender, change your birth certificate, that means by law you have to be treated exactly the same as a biological woman.
Dominic,
that means you can have access to female spaces, like prisons, like toilets, like schools,
Rewind.
like sports
That
facilities.
was handled very promptly in the 2010 Equalities Act. The changing rooms argument, the women's spaces argument, that's not happening anymore. That's not what this is about.
Well, Sean, which side of the party are you on?
What seems to happen here, there's a number of Conservative MPs that were concerned about would women's spaces be protected, would people who are not adults or have their gender physically altered, and that's why they...
Nothing to do with that. This is so frustrating.
Amy, how has it nothing to do with
because
it?
This is about
being legally recognised as another sex.
This is about
it's
about admin. It's about paperwork. It's about taking that final step. When you already have a gender, you already have a passport that says you're a woman. That's a driving licence.
Right.
The only thing it affects is your birth certificate, which basically affects when you can get married and what it says in your death certificate. Don't say no, because that is correct.
What Amy's forgetting thing, right? There's two things with the law. Firstly, it's the first step. Where's the next step?
No, that step was in 2010. That step's gone. They're already in your toilet.
That's what these
Sorry to break
Conservative
it to you.
MPs were concerned about. The second piece is as well, once you are identified as a woman, it means organisations can't keep women's spaces clear. Because what we're talking about here, we are talking about what trans people want, that's fine, but also what do women want? Women might want that situation some other way and need to be protected. Please, Amy, let me finish.
But you're not talking about the current situation whatsoever.
MPs were really concerned about is the changes to women's spaces, etc. And also, which I think is a really important piece, you cannot criminalise parents for having conversations with their children. When you have a child, you are legally responsible for the welfare of that child. So how can your child go through this big change and you not be involved in the conversation?
Well, indeed, because Amy, I think if we focus in on that
on
point,
the gender conversion point.
which is what you're particularly concerned about. Do you not understand that for young people, for example, Carabelle, who has been on this show, who I've spoken to, who sued the Tavistock Clinic,
and then
the
appealed,
huge risk... Yes, but the Tavistock Clinic is now closed because the Conservative government has decided it's dangerous. But let me finish the point and then you can respond.
We need more regional centres.
Let me finish the point and then you can respond. So for someone like Carabelle, she was so young when she started completely life-changing medical procedures to transition her from a woman to a man. Now, actually, what she realised, and this is happening, by the way, for many, many people who want to transition young, what she realised is that actually this was about her sexuality. It wasn't about gender. She should never have had these life-changing treatments, which have completely destroyed her physically because you can't reverse the impact. And the issue is, Amy, now under this law, potentially people in her life, counsellors, medical professionals, maybe even her parents, would be banned from having conversations with her about this.
That's not at all what would happen. And actually, I'm not trying to invalidate the experience of detransitioners. They're completely valid experiences, just like there are people who have regrets over abortions. That's not how we make our laws about abortions. We make the laws based on the majority experience. And that's what's happening here. In the Cass report, it identifies...
But you must see the trends are changing, though.
So with the cases of detransition or healthcare that wasn't correctly applied, or, like you said, it can get confused with sexuality. That's all true.
But, Dominique, that's happening all the time
let me finish
now.
this point. That is all true. And that's why gender identity clinics need to be rolled out and more readily available because they deal with that. And one of the main things I took from reading the Cass report in full is that at that stage, it's that quick access to the healthcare which differentiates between those struggling with their sexuality and those who are genuinely trans.
But you're also still defending the Tavistock.
But the bill would restrict professionals from having that conversation. So I think, Amy, you've missed the point. And the deeper thing here, you made the point that we don't make our laws on the reality of one or two people. Well, actually, there's a much larger group of people, women, 51% of the population, who are nowhere to be seen in this bill. Exactly. And what the Conservative MPs were saying was, we just need to pause so that we can make sure that women's spaces are respected.
Conservative MPs have been looking at this since 2017. The work of an MP like Alicia Kearns is a brilliant example of what happens when you thoroughly look at this and you understand it, and there is no way that you could go against conversion
therapy. I have to say, I think it's quite patronising.
I think
it's quite patronising when the left say, because we disagree with you, oh, we're so thick, we're so stupid, we don't understand the point.
It's not.
Well, that is what you're saying.
Half the country.
If we disagree with you, we're so thick, we must not understand the point. We understand the point, we just disagree.
No.
We understand the point because
all three of you have sat here and not known what the GRC actually is. So, I do think you're a bit ignorant on that.
That is not true at all.
You've conflated it. You've all conflated it with women's spaces.
You're not using your logic.
Hold on.
No, sorry, when you can legally change your gender, when you are legally recognised as another sex, or it's not just about the birth certificate, it's about how the law responds to it, which means legally you have to be treated as that
But
biological
that's happened
sex.
with
Are
the
you
20...
stupid?
You're saying, am I stupid?
Are you genuinely stupid? Because you're not understanding it, and that's why it doesn't protect female spaces.
2010 we have had these in place since. You are talking about the Equalities Act gave transgender women the access to all the spaces.
To make it legally, to make it easier to legally change your gender without a diagnosis of gender dysphoria.
Final word to Sean. Final word to Sean.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
How can she sit here and say, am I stupid? How can you allow that on your programme?
Hold on,
She's asked a question.
Am I stupid?
Yes, but you also said that we didn't understand the point.
Because you clearly don't. You're conflating it. All three of you are conflating it with women's spaces. It's nothing to do with women's spaces.
I don't think we should throw personal insults around at all, but you did say that if we disagreed with you, that we've misunderstood, and I find that quite patronising.
If you're
misunderstood what?
The GRC.
Right,
a gender recognition certificate. I've already explained it. I've explained it.
So the gender recognition certificate means that you can legally change your sex on your birth certificate, right? Without a diagnosis of gender dysphoria.
Which is something that Theresa May's government agreed that the first thing that needs to be removed is the medicalisation.
Completely irrelevant.
Dan, you live as a gay man. You are a gay man. Does that have to be medicalised?
No, but that totally...
That's something innate.
And if you don't understand that there's a real difference between sexuality and gender identity, then I actually feel it's you who's missing the point.
No, what I'm saying is it's innate.
I have to say
it's something that you don't need to be told by a doctor.
The point that Amy has misunderstood is that the Gender Recognition Bill lowers all of this to the age of 16. And the point that Dominique is trying to make, the law in England will respond to you differently if you are legally a woman. And the worry is you'll then have access to surgery, etc.
You already do. You already do. How old were you when you realised your gender?
I was born the way I am.
Oh, that's funny, because that matches exact experiences.
But I think... I think you're missing the point between gender identity and biological sex.
Can we just agree on one thing? That we do need to take the heat out of this debate, because it's increasingly toxic. Look what's just happened here.
We didn't do a very good job of that tonight. Look, let's move on, because the World Economic Forum's annual summit has coaxed a mob of the elite to the Swiss ski resort of Davos this week, including mainstream media barons, business bigwigs, government leaders and slippery Starmer. And the leader of the opposition has even admitted today that he prefers the globalist fest in Davos to life-serving Brits in Westminster. Watch.
Let us just ask you quickly, you have to choose now between Davos or Westminster?
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained. And, it's closed and we're not having meaning. Once you get out of Westminster, whether it's Davos or anywhere else, you actually engage with people that you can see working with in the future. Westminster is just a tribal shouting place.
OK, you just stay there. You stay there, Keir. You enjoy your time with the globalists and Davos. Some also had the cheek to have a dig at Rishi for not ditching the country to be a WEF lapdog. Look, I actually think if you prefer schmoozing in Switzerland to doing real work in Westminster, then it's a real worry that you want to be our next Prime Minister. I don't think Mr Starmer has his priorities right. Amy Nickell, Sean Bailey, Dominic Samuels, do stand by, because coming up,